I think we are screwed. It's not gonna happen. You're totally right, right? We do have a problem. I mean, there's a slogan, there are no jobs on a dead planet. So I believe in radical honesty. I believe we have to talk more honest, and like, the right wing always uses fear because it's one of the strongest emotions. As a scientist, we always want to use reason, but at the same time, it's time to be scared, right? So I think we have to like work on scientific literacy, really make people clear what are the consequences. We have to talk more about responsibility and duty. The last 30 years, right, the end of history, neoliberalism and so on, we talk about rights all the time, we don't talk about duties. This is actually a lot of times connected to Carl Schmitt, so I want to distance myself from that. But when we talk about rights, we have to talk about duties because they are two sides of the same coin. So, yeah, I have no good answer to this, to be honest. As I said, I think we have to try, and I believe in radical honesty and like talking about how we should be afraid not of losing our job, but of not being able to eat, right? So trade-offs are real. So this is like my common thing. Trade-offs are real. Nature doesn't negotiate. And what we can do is to prevent the climate catastrophe to become a climate apocalypse. And that's what we have to put on the table. And does it work? In my daily politics, when I sit in the executive committee meeting, sometimes it is 1 to 24, 1 to 26, and I'm the lone voice. And I'm like, can we please talk about science? And it's not happening. So I understand your frustration, and yeah, let's just try.
About the democratic peace theory, I understand your concerns and your critique also of quite superficial debates about democracy when one does not really define the concept, what one means. And you rightly said that democracies are not necessarily and essentially peaceful. They conduct wars, and this has been proven in history. My question is, why should we say, and I know this is almost a dogma among peace scholars in the United States and Europe, why do we say, and how can we justify to say, that democracies do not engage in war with other democracies? I would say quite often it's a matter of definition. A self-declared democracy would declare the adversary as being a system that is totalitarian or whatever, so as to justify to attack that system. Just let's take the war in 1999, which was illegal, which was a war of aggression against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Yeah, one may say arrogantly in the West that is not a democracy or a dictatorship, and in this case the theory would be right, but quite often it's a matter of definition. And I don't want to go into other examples.
I think this is a very important point. I hope I said do not typically engage as a disclaimer, but that democracies don't typically engage. But yeah, this is also like a huge trick. So in political science and political theory, those that are like really democracy advocates, what they do is anything that is not functioning 100%, they're calling it an autocracy. So if you make everything that is not the ideal, the other category, obviously the other category is going to look bad or worse, which with the environment it's actually not, because we have a bell curve, so democracies are somewhere in the middle, and those classified autocracies, obviously from above, are on both sides. They are on the ones that excel, and they are on the ones that are really lacking. But it's a huge problem. We have that for human rights and so on too. Like yesterday, the day before yesterday, when we were talking about India, like somebody was like, India is not that Western values of democracy are not there. India is the biggest democracy in the world, right? They like what they do is amazing. The whole infrastructure that is necessary to bring votes for people. Yeah, ideally maybe we don't like the outcome. So we have to be very careful in what we call democracy, how we classify democracy, and what at the end comes out of the statistic, because it is true. At the end, a lot of times autocracies look worse, monarchies look worse because the way the definition is done, right? Like a scientific experiment. If you define your factors wrongly, you're going to come with like the conclusion you want. So 100% agreement. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
I just want to ask about the management of the common pool resources. Like the private actors and the private companies which are involved mostly in the common pool resources management, I think they're more violating the laws of environmental. So what is your idea about that?
I think you should answer that one. Did you pay attention? I'm sorry, I have the teaching spirit. I do catch people. Can you repeat that?
About the
What is the
common pool
question?
resources.
Sorry?
The management of common pool resources. Like
Yeah.
mostly today, the private sector or the private actors are involved in the management of common pool resources, which is within the countries or at an international level. And mostly these private actors or private sector are violator of, they violate the laws of environment and rules regulation regarding the environmental protection or climate protection.
Really, the situation is very complicated for environmental questions. Because sometimes we have right to be interested for small things. But in another side, hundreds or thousands of hectares with forest are under the fire. And this is question, what to invest? When to take attention, more attention. Sure. As minister, I have represented in government and in parliament too many drafts law for protection of environment. But now I'm thinking, too many funds have been used for different things. But in Albania we have not yet any airplane to use, tip Canadair, who knows, to use against fires. We have not enough funds to use for the people to understand the real importance of the environment. Is a crucial point. If you put good rules, but you don't respect, it's very bad. For example, we have approved in our parliament that it's not allowed to take inerts from the rivers 500 meters near to bridges in the rivers. But unfortunately, you can see that mounds of inerts are just close to bridge, and the rivers are damaged. We have an old bridge constructed during the former Albanian king Zog in a river of Mati, which is very good. For that time have been excellent. And now she is ready to fall, because in contrabanda and in, against the rules are taking in nets. So it's most important to put good rules, but it's yet most important to respect the rules and to prepare good policies in order to protect the environment. Environment is not only one question. Environment you can find everywhere to protect the air, to protect the water, to protect the land, to protect the nature, and to respect the rules. Everything that you have approved for better. So I think that this is very complex. It's very easy to speak. It's very easy, but it's very difficult to applicate. World is a mixture. It's a mixture. Are not the countries like is Germany, Switzerland, or France, and so on. Has a great difference in the level of conceptuality of environment protection. For me, this is very important that people to be more conscient for the protection of environment because it's their life.
Have you heard have you heard about social facts? So there's this concept by Marcel Mauss and so on and Turner in anthropology of like social facts. So we have natural facts, right? Gravity. We don't know about gravity so sure yet, but we have natural science and natural science facts, and social facts are something that happens as if it was a fact, but it's not like a fact of physics, right? Certain behaviors, okay, how we interact with each other. Society decides on something, and that's then a social fact. Marriage, for instance, the institution of marriage can be a social fact. So it is something that is not actually a fact, but we act as if it was a fact. So we need to have environmental protection as a social fact. It needs to be ingrained in us that it's not okay to throw out trash, that it's not okay to pollute the rivers or like do certain things next to the river because this is ours, right? So common pool management is a problem of rules. We have Ostrom. She actually got Elena Ostrom. She got a I think even Nobel Prize for economics for like saying how common pool management works, and she said it's more democratic. But if you actually look at what she looked at, she has all those Polynesian societies and so on. And if you look closer, the contrast she's making her studies is between the big national institution and the local chieftain. So when you look more narrow, you find that there were religious cultural rules to, for instance, overfishing. So those places where they had the religious or cultural rules against overfishing, or like the way of how they share, right? There were some rules how it's shared. Common pool management works very well. So there has to be norms. So environmental protection has to be a norm, a social fact. And if it's like penetrating all society, we call it total social fact. So we have to have it become a total social fact. So it's ingrained in us, and that's a matter of education. And for me, it's also a matter of like everybody being batshit scared. So we actually act, right? Education is not enough because education is just knowledge, but it has to be ingrained in us, right? So what we often confuse is that you have values and then action, and then you act upon your values. But the opposite is like more the case. The opposite meaning we have a certain action, and then we rationalize why we're doing something. So that's why also laws forbidding stuff sometimes work, because it's not that we want to protect the environment and then we do this action. No, we are going to do this action because it's allowed or forbidden, and then we rationalize later and the values come later. So it's called value-action gap in sociology. So if we had something to become a social fact, we would all act upon it. It would become our second nature. Again, right? Aristotle said virtue is a habit. So it would become our second nature. We do that, and then we solve common pool management. We don't solve common pool management with privatization, because then the private person has, for instance, if we have a tree, selling the tree is maybe more beneficial to us, but there was I think Indian economist that said actually a tree, the work it's doing for the whole society is like $100,000, just one tree. Right, the ecosystem work. It's even more. It was even more than $100,000, and it's like 10 years ago or something. I read this, but if you think about it, if I privatize this common pool forest, me selling the wood would be, for me, rational. Right, that's the rational logic of privatization of property. But if it was common for the common good, it has a lot more value. So we have to like differentiate and like try to put forward the idea that we have to always think for like more than ourselves.
Very briefly about environmental politics environmental policies and electoral politics and the problem of double standards and how this may delegitimize the entire cause. One example recently from our electoral campaign in Austria, which is started right now, because our president would like to get re-elected. And so he received in state visits the King of the Netherlands and traveled with the King of the Netherlands from Vienna to Graz, few hundred kilometers by train. And because he's in the electoral campaign, he felt that it was good for him to announce this in a tweet with a photo of him sitting in the train carriage together with the King of the Netherlands and writing, traveling environmentally friendly from Vienna to Graz with the King and so on, while the media found out that at the same time the entire fleet of Mercedes fleets was traveling along the road to Graz. So he was cheating the public. The media found out, but the problem is if people realize, if the electors realize that this is just, environmental issues are just something politicians use to gain maybe in elections, and if necessary they would cheat, as in this case, one may delegitimize the entire cause, and one ultimately may get even less support for that. And there are many other examples one could give also from other countries, but because this is just 2 weeks ago,
yeah, it's politics as show, no?
Illustration.
Yeah, it's political show. I mean, this is one of the huge problems. Actually, when I was in Paris when they had the Paris Agreement. So everybody was celebrating. I was like close to my PhD ending, so everybody was celebrating 1.5 degrees. I cried. And people were like, why are you crying? And I was like, because this is a political show. Just putting, the real agreement is 2 degrees, right? They said, we prefer to be below 1.5 degrees, but they didn't like sign any concrete policies, right? They just made this very general, without anything behind, declaration that we want to stick with 1.5 degrees. That's political show. That's promising something to the public. So we can also discuss about the whole COP, right? All the COPs of their just political shows, and if they're even not negative, because the public has a feeling something happens. People are already paying attention. So all this show is actually maybe counterproductive because everybody has a feeling things are happening. And then with this politician, I think that's also a huge problem. We a lot of times think politicians are way more competent than they are. Because I would argue that politician, he hasn't understood it yet. So in philosophy, and this is very important, there's a difference between knowledge, knowing, and understanding. And like in some languages we have this very clearly. That's also interesting then of perspective, right? If you come to different languages, they have a difference between how you can do it, you can know it. In German we also have verstehen und wissen, okay? Verstehen meaning like having the deep understanding. And I would say this is one of the largest problems in environmental politics. Most politicians do not understand where we're at. Yes, most people do not understand where we're at, but also most politicians have not understood the issue as an existential threat to humanity. The Oxford Institute of Futurology has been polled in 2012, 2011. What's the chance of humanity going extinct this century? And they gave it 19%. Okay, this is not we are living in bad conditions, right? This is human extinction. And you know what? Russian roulette has a better chance. And that's something like we have to, and the most important thing, that's why I talked about honesty, is repetition, right? We learn this, that repetition is more important than truth or like logic, so we have to repeat that, and I don't know. You can judge. Does he understand the problem? He's probably an old white guy too, right?
He is coming from the Green Party. He was even the leader of the Green Party some years ago. Now he is the president of Austria.
Yeah, that happens also if like people get corrupted by the system, right? Like institutionalization. We see that with the Greens now here. I mean, they're building tanks. Have you looked at the environmental footprint of the tank? There is no sustainable war, right? I mean, there's no way. I mean, if they start beating each other with sticks, I think we can all like stop doing cultural diplomacy. We are fine with it, right? If war is only done by sticks anymore, that would be sustainable, and we would be like, yeah, let them fight out with their little sticks. That's okay. But war is not sustainable, and we have the Greens now.
So the political populism is a kind of corruption about this. The problem is that everybody, politicians, they're promising increasing of living standards. It's not possible. If you are aware of the job that was done by Albert Gore, former vice president of the United States, the real number of population on the earth should be 2.5 billion. Each year we are cutting forests 0.4%. In 20-25 years from now, the massive forests will be only in Canada and Russia. It should be stopped. Even if I'm happy this year the world's economy is not going to grow, but every politician is coming and saying that I promise you growth, I promise you increasing of living standard. Sorry, when you increase living standard, you give to the people additional duties, additional goods, etc. But any productive additional good means spending of resources.
Yes.
Where do you pick up these resources? Earth is not enough. The population of Earth within last 1,000 years ago it was 300 million. 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago again it was 300. 3,000 years ago it was 100 million. But within last millennium it had been growing 80 times. 80 times on the same Earth. And in the coming perspective, we don't have a perspective to be transferred into the other planet. That's the strategy. We have to understand that. It's global warming. So in my country was not very good country, but this year we had 42. If it's going to be 45, 47, how to be protected?
That's something we also don't talk enough about. So 2 degrees, right, is global average. That can be 8 degrees in Antarctica and so on. Like this can be substantially more, and it makes some countries already unlivable, even 2 degrees, right? So, and we don't know. 2 degrees is a political decision. It's not a scientific one. It's not that the scientists said, oh, with 2 degrees average, we are fine. No, this is a political aim. And yeah, in many countries, the average of 2 degrees will be a lot more. And then we have trees that can't adapt and so on. So I 100% agree. As a politician, we have to promise stuff. And a lot of times I promise stuff. And I think there's wishful thinking all involved. Like, since I'm hanging out with lots of politicians, I'm actually sure that they don't believe it's as bad as it is. So when they do their promises of like jobs, right? We have it there, promises of jobs and like keeping jobs. We just recently did something on like the strike on airports. And I was like, do we have to support this airport strike? So people, I understand that the workers have to be paid better, but don't we want to get rid of the whole industry? Right? And this was the annoying scientist. And then I heard, but it's popular.
I'd like to say something about this. We are discussing for the double standards. According to my opinion, double standards you can find everywhere. Everywhere, even in more developed countries. But the level is different. One indicator for this is how many percent of the populations or the voters of a country participate during elections. Because if you promise during these elections too much and do not nothing, but very, very few, the voters are disappointed. And next elections, they do not participate. They don't believe to you. This is the question. Because double standard exists everywhere, according to the interests of parties or different politicians that are running to be member of parliament, the level of the people who participate in voting process, and so on. It's very complex. But finally, I don't believe that, I don't mention any specific country, but I'm sure that everywhere you can find double standards. And this is not good, not good. This damages democracy, this damages the believers, the people to believe in democracy and in the our system, which is the best. Democratic system is the best, but it's not perfect. It's not perfect.
I don't know. I have no conclusive answer to which system is the best.
Because you are active in politics. I'm not anymore.
Well, but we have to all learn from you to be like 7 times minister candidate. Yeah.
You have perspective because you are young and just involved in politics. I have finished my career in politics.
Yeah, I would actually say, well, coming back to human nature, double standard is human nature. Okay, cognitive dissonance. This is something we have ingrained, and the Enlightenment had the idea that we can like differentiate between reason and emotions and so on. Right? Modernism. There's like a great book, "We Have Never Been Modern" by Bruno Latour, telling that it is not possible. The idea of like us objectively looking somewhere. Right? It's not. Our human nature is to have cognitive dissonance, meaning to believe 2 different things that don't go together at the same time. And we are very good at dissociation. When I go out here, I'm not thinking about climate change all the time. If I did, I couldn't live, right? Even Bruno Latour said in a talk, even climate change scientists are deniers in daily life because we have to. And this comes back to our tiger brain, okay? So if we think the whole time about a tiger being somewhere, we are not going to collect food, we're not going to procreate. So we need to be able to not think about the tiger that is going to eat us or going to hunt us in order to procreate, right? So humanity's survival used to be dependent on our ability not to think about the bad stuff around, right? And then we
And not to think about death.
or not to think about death, yeah. There's a substantial dread of death, right? So we need to think more about death and like all those problems. So, do we have more questions? What about those? Ah, yeah, in the back.
Yeah, it's just a little comment. I just want to say that we happen to be living in a society of economical competition. The world is competing against each other economically. It all boils down to how much you have, how much you can gain. we live in the world, and we say we owe money, and the world owes about this amount of trillions of dollars to who? To ourselves, or to another people in another planet? I don't know. So this confusion and complications that we put ourselves into, I think personally is putting us in a situation where we cannot really clearly understand the way forward, because we are confused in our own mind and our own decisions and our own policies. And another thing that comes to play is when you talk about the environment, and we talk about how bad the environment is going because of our human activities that we partake in on Earth, production being one of the main reasons for this. And we live in a world where it follows by itself when given the time to do so. But we are not giving the world the time to follow by itself. And I personally think that when we are paying attention to huge industries that produce, using a small or identical product that we all know about, which is the mobile phone, let's say, for example. We produce so much mobile phones in a year that it's crazy. And I know people who are still using iPhone 5. That's a really old phone, maybe more than a decade. But it's still functioning, and it's still working. So what do you think about we, as people, sanctioning or giving companies a period of time of production because they can produce to meet the market requirement, and then also giving them a sanction to stop production for a period of time? This period of time could be a decade. When those decade period of time comes, the pollution that is going out into the environment could fall, because these companies are making so much profit they cannot spend in a decade, yet still they keep producing. It's all about economy, it's all about money, and I don't see how humans have made a printed paper so important than their own safety in the environment in which they live, in which they cannot go anywhere else. It's even crazy to think that people are investing money to see if we can live somewhere else, in another planet. Like, I don't understand. So, for me, we are having people who are ruling over us, hiding behind masks, being very cunning, and making us all fall in love, follow things, and there's nobody to blame. Because at the end of the day, you can't blame anybody directly because nobody is at fault. Everybody will lay the fault to somebody else, and some other institution and say, I'm not the one, I'm just working, or I'm just doing what this is. So, like I started my sentence, we are living in a sophisticated, confused world. I'm wondering what we can do to simplify that, because simplification is the way forward for me. If we face the problems we have as it is, rather than trying to curve or complicated ideologies, philosophies, policies, institutions, blah, 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 that are all trying to make things that will benefit them at the end, rather than benefit the whole society.
I mean, this is capitalism, right? It's privatizing gains and externalizing costs. So you caught a couple of things I see in your argument. So first, there's planned obsolescence, right? The whole thing about either it's going to die, like I have to need a new phone, or some other phone is sexier, right? The bigger car engine and so on. That's advertisement, right? That in capitalism we don't differentiate between needs and wants, right? There's new needs created all the time, but they're actually wants, right? We don't need another phone, as you said. The phone, iPhone 5 is still good. I, by the way, have a Fairphone, so I'm fine off. It's like a block phone where you can like change parts for that very reason. So when we look at how the global economy is organized, it's not organized for the common good, right? In Africa, you have the concept of Ubuntu, which directly is an operating system, right? They named an operating system that is common pooled after this concept of like caring for each other. So again, human nature, right? Human nature is we like to have the bigger phone next. We like to have the faster phone. We get used to a lot of things, and so we have to renegotiate what it is to have like a good living, right? We have to get away from the dominant idea that a good living is bigger houses, flying somewhere, that's actually wealth, right? We have to reconceptualize this idea of wealth. And I do think that the Global South and like other ideas can play a big part and should play a big part in putting forward other ideas. What we can do about planned obsolescence, I think governments could right to repair, right? Like we can easily implement that if we have the right people in government. You can just make a right to repair. Okay, so that's done. It's very easy to get rid of that. So some solutions are some things can actually be solved very easily. But then we come back to who has the money and who's going to come in power. We were talking about the Greens. The German Greens take money from corporations. Okay, they take funding for corporations. Then they, like all the other parties, actually except our party, that's why we are poor, takes money from corporations. Right? I'm in an unpaid office. The other parties, the executive, they all get money. Sometimes we joke about that because they're way richer. But if you do get money in democracies, right? Germany actually in some lobbying laws are worse than the US. Okay, and we can see that very well in the US. So those are the interests you talked about that have an interest in continuing to destroy the world. So one of the things would be we need to get money out of politics. You are? No? Do you want to have a finishing thought?
I think is the time to finish.
Well, you can have like a closing argument how we all become ministers, maybe, as a secret.
No, is something else?
No, you can have a closing sentence. You don't want to close?
No, normally I am concentrated, except my presentation of today lasted 20 minutes. It's too much.
So he's not going to tell us his secrets? Maybe he does in private. I'm not sure. So we are going to have a coffee break. Use that maybe to get out of him how you become so influential, because I believe you're all going to work on the common good in the future, right? That's the key. We need more people that think of the common good and go into politics. So please do so. Catch the coffee and catch his secrets. So thank you all very much for listening to us, and thank you all for your engaging questions.
I agree with you.